Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish with on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. We are going to be doing a draft of Phyrexia All Will Be One. It's finally arrived in the Quickdraft queue. It's an exciting time. If you're wondering about this draft token up here, there was a sale in the store recently. I decided it would be worth my time to spin the gems while it's at a 10% discount. Go ahead and pick it up. Anyway, we're not going to do a premiere draft today. We are going to do a quick draft. So in the first draft video I did, I discussed the concept of potential is a new way to evaluate your draft picks. The short version of it is you look at a card and ask, does this card win the game by itself? With the reasonable assumption that you have a deck filled with lands and creatures. As your draft progresses, you begin to know whether your deck is going to be filled with creatures. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So, Phyrexia. Does this card win the game by itself? Yes, it can. It is a creature factory. As soon as you have 4 total lands, you can begin activating the Phyrexia to make these colorless mites that have Toxic 1 and can't block. So the way to evaluate a poison creature, it's a little bit difficult, but you basically treat the Toxic as if the creature had double power for the purposes of killing the opponent, with the added lethality that life gain does not slow it down. There is no life gain against Toxic other than a green-white legend in this set, which slows down the rate you get poison counters. And that's a rare. So for the most part, Toxic is sort of like, Toxic 1 would be like a 2-power creature for hitting the opponent, except they can't gain life. It's kind of how you think about it. Now a 1/1 that can't block is not amazing. There's a lot of inevitability to Phyrexia. So if you think of it like a 4-mana creature, it would be terrible, except that the next turn you draw another one, and another one, and another one. So you have lots of these terrible 4-mana creatures that you can just keep putting out over and over without having to draw cards. So, it can snowball, right? So turn 5, the opponent, theoretically, on a, kind of a goldfish board, uncontested. Turn 5, the opponent would take 1 Toxic. Turn 6, they take another 2 Toxic, putting them to 3. The next turn, they take another 3 Toxic, putting them to 6, and the turn after that, they're dead. So, if you started activating this on turn 4 and you did it for every turn after that, that would be, let's see, 1 on 5, 3 on 6, 6 on 7, and dead on 8. Okay. Alright, so not the worst clock. Really. Not the worst clock. Because it represents being able to do this every turn. It's mana intensive, though, in terms of tempo, in terms of what it costs us in sort of unlocked potential of our other cards. It can cost us quite a bit, but if we're flooding out, it's a really solid threat to think of as starting at 4 mana. It can also color fix the turn it enters the battlefield. So, this is a potential win condition. Its potential to win the game by itself is not bad. Start activating it on 4 and win on turn 8. Let's see, over the course of the next 4 turns, that's about equivalent to having 5 power as a 4-drop. Okay, Mirrex is good. It's mana intensive, though. It can also help your board go wide, which makes them more likely to connect. Overall, I like it. Let's see if there's anything better. Alright, Bladed Ambassador. 3-1 for 2. Over the course of 7 turns, uncontested, this could win the game. Can give itself indestructible once, unless you proliferate. So that's not bad. That can let it attack at least once into an unfavorable board. So it's a little bit better at winning the game than another 3-1 for 1 would have been. For its mana value, I think this is fine. I think this is fine. It would, on an empty board, it would win the game roughly the same time that Mirrex does, but it would leave all your mana open during all those turns, and your board would not be so wide. Resistance Reunited. Tricks have no potential to win the game by themselves. They need other cards to help them do anything. If your entire deck was full of combat tricks, you would lose. You need threats. That's not to say it's a bad card or that you can't play it. But we are more interested in potential. I am, at least. Tamiyo's Logbook. Does this card win the game by itself? No, the funny thing about card advantage is that potential kind of ignores card advantage. Now, card advantage is great when it's also attached to a threat, when it's attached to something that, like a creature that can win you the game on its own. This, however, is an enormous mana sink, and the way that card advantage intersects with potential is if you manage to get enough card advantage, it can allow you to draw a bunch of cards that have high potential, or maybe a bunch of low potential cards that add up to have high potential. It does not win the game on its own, though, and in fact, with the mana sink of it, it slows you down from casting your other threats. In a very artifact-heavy deck, where the activation on this gets cheap, I'd say this is probably a good card. But it's very early in the draft to say that, and I don't think its potential is that great, if any. Mandible Justiciar? Is that pronounced Justicar? I need to look that up. Okay. It looks like Justiciar, but I'm going to call it a Justicar for now. That's how I hear a lot of people say it. So can this win the game by itself? It's a 2-1 lifelinker. Takes 10 turns to kill the opponent. The lifelink helps offset a damage race, and if you happen to have other artifacts, this grows, and that if you can get it to be 3 power on a relatively decent number of turns or more, then its potential is not bad for its mana cost. Overall, for its mana cost, for a 2-drop, its potential is not bad. 1 toughness makes it a bit fragile. A little bit harder to attack in unless you've boosted it. Vanish into Eternity, no potential to win the game. If your deck was all removal spells, you would have no threats and you would lose. Malcator's Watcher. Its potential to win the game by itself is low. It would attack over the course of 20 turns to win the game. Prologue to Phyrexia. It has no potential to win the game by itself. So another angle, once your deck solidifies a bit, you can start to look at is synergy. And if the way that most or all of your creatures are winning is through poison counters and you have other spells that add poison counters, this can become a helper piece that's reasonable in a deck, right? At that point, it's kind of like a shock that draws you a card. Overall, though, it has no potential to win the game by itself. Cruel Grimnarch. So a 5/5 Death Toucher is a hard creature to block. It's difficult to deal with. And over the course of 4 turns would attack to win the game. A bit slower than Mirex in terms of its absolute potential to win the game. Now I do think, defensively, having a 5/5 for 6 here is nice. So we're not too concerned about the card advantage. It's a nice bonus though, and if it gains 4 life, then that helps to offset a damage race. Overall, not bad. We would probably be hoping for 5 power at, 4 or 5 mana, ideally. Right, when we explored Mirex, it's sort of like a 5 power creature for 4 mana, but you have to keep putting mana into it. It's solid. Overall, it's solid. Wins the game faster than a 2/2 and is more likely to get through for combat damage than a 2/2. Gulping Scrap Trap. Enters the battlefield or dies. Proliferate, can't depend on that. Don't know if it will interact with our deck or not. Over the course of 5 turns, wins the game. So, since it's a mana less, about the same time that Cruel Grimnark would. There's only so many 6, 7, 8 drops that you can put into a deck. If you do, you need to be aware of your ability to generate mana in the deck and ramp and find lands. So sometimes a 5-drop that has the same potential as a 6-drop. A 5/5 Death Toucher is more likely to get through for combat damage. This comes down a turn sooner, which could be very relevant to keeping you alive and keeping you in the game. These are roughly on par. Vraska's Fall has no potential to win the game by itself. With the poison counter, it can be a helper piece. Gets rid of an opponent's thing, gives them a poison counter. There could be deck building synergy with this card, but it has no potential on its own. Axiom Engraver, very low potential. The Rummaging is nice. That can turn, dead card draws into cards that might have advantage or, potential to win the game. But at 1 power, it takes it 20 turns to attack the opponent and win the game. Very low potential. Sawblade Scamp. So it has low potential. It does have a bit of what they called reach back in the day, where you can deal damage that's not combat damage. So Sawblade Scamp can keep putting pressure on the opponent by removing oil counters even when it can't attack. That's not terrible, but still it only does 1 point a turn. Its potential to win the game by itself is very, very low. And Lattice Blade Mantis. So this can attack twice for 5, and it's hard to stop in that case, and untaps itself, so it's sort of like it has vigilance. And then after dealing that 10 damage potentially, it would take it still another 3 turns to finish the opponent off. Overall, not bad. Square deal. Doesn't have a faster clock than a 4/4 would have. Has some nice options though. So roughly on par with where Mirex is. Mirex might actually have a slightly faster clock. We kind of ranked Mirex as if it had 5 power for 4. But it's also a huge mana sink. So with that in mind, the highest potential cards in this pack are the Lattice Blade Mantis, Gulping Scrap Trap, Cruel Grimnark, Bladed Ambassador, I'll kind of give an honorable mention to Mandible Justicar here. If you have other artifacts in the deck, the clock quickens on this one, and the lifelink is nice. And Mirex. Alright. So, there's more than one angle to examine a draft from. One of them is your choice of colors, how you choose what color you're going into. You want to stay very open at first if you can. So the thing I like about Mirex here, it's not the most efficient threat because of all the mana investment it requires, but it can go into any color of deck. It doesn't necessarily even completely color hose us because it can generate a mana of any color the turn it comes down. And we can keep our colors open on this pack by taking the Mirex. And while some of these other cards have decent potential to win the game by themselves, you know, Glassblade Mantis in green, Scrap Trap and Grimnark in black, Bladed Ambassador, Mandible Justicar in white, keeping our colors open at this stage of the draft is a very nice option to have. I'm almost certain that Mirex will make the cut into the final deck since it's a land. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is a great first pick. I'm taking Mirex. Alright. Hexgold Halberd. It's a 2/2 for 2. Without moving the equipment, it gains First Strike and Trample on your turn. That does make it hard to deal with, especially the First Strike. Makes it a very good attacker. And even, you know, putting a little 1/1 or something in its way doesn't stop its damage because of Trample. Also, this card represents not just the 2/2, it can represent putting First Strike and Trample on our turn, onto any creature later in the game by equipping. All of the 4 Mirrodin cards have pretty decent potential in this regard because they take the you know, kind of questionable potential that a piece of equipment has, add a creature token to it, and now it's a pretty square deal. It's pretty nice. So, if you treat this as a 2/2 First Striker with Trample, you know, the clock isn't that fast, but it's hard to block, so it's more likely to get in for damage. Its potential is not the worst, especially for its mana cost. Unnatural Restoration, no potential to win the game by itself, requires other cards to do anything. Ribskiff. So, kind of like equipment, vehicles are a little bit of a conundrum. You can assume that you have a deck full of creatures and lands when you're asking questions about potential. The more of these kind of cards you take, though, the less that certainty becomes. As you put more of these into your deck, the stronger and stronger need you have to take creatures. Now this one does replace itself with a card draw, and it represents 4 power with the clock and 2 toxic, which is like 4 power. So, advances both clocks at the same time, at the same rate. And on 4 mana, that is a perfectly fine rate. Unfortunately, it requires Crew 3, so it takes the potential of one of our other cards to be able to use this card. For that reason, since it eats into the potential of at least one other card, I'm not in that big of a hurry to take it yet. Alright, Basilica Shepherd. Does this card win the game by itself? There's a decent probability. A 3 power flyer for 5 is already not the worst clock. A 3/3 flyer is fairly likely to get through. It's hard to block, hard to deal with. This one also makes 2 mites. So, it represents 5 total power, which could win the game over the course of 4 turns. It also represents 4 powers worth of Toxic. So the clock would be the same with Toxic 2 as Power 4 would be, assuming no life gain. The potential on this card is quite high. It's very good. Doesn't require another card's potential to unlock it like the Rib Skiff, so I would say Basilica Shepherd is a better choice than the Rib Skiff. I like it better than the Halberd. The Halberd's not bad, but the clock is faster and harder to deal with the Shepherd. Mirin Bardiche. So, this makes a 2/2, turns into a 4/3 with Vigilance. Later, you can take this equipment and give your other creatures more potential to win the game. So a 4-power creature for 5 is not bad, like the Scrap Trap that we looked at. And even though it's mana intensive, to some extent you can value the equipment that's left behind as well. So it's a little more than just a 4-power Vigilance creature for 5. It also represents the threat of turning your other creatures into more potential. Overall, not bad. Not bad at all. Because of the aspect of re-equipping, it's maybe roughly on par with the Angel, except that the Angel flies. So I think the Basilica Shepherd is perhaps a little bit better potential in total than the Bardiche is. Alright, Zealot's Conviction. So auras, like equipment that give a boost like this, you can sort of count them as having their own potential. This one also counts as a combat trick, so maybe you get card advantage out of it. If you get the Corrupted to turn on, then it counts as 2 power. At the point that you get 2 power out of this, then it's sort of like having a 2-power creature with haste for 1 mana, which is pretty phenomenal. But you can't depend on the Corrupted getting turned on, certainly not at this stage of the draft where it's second pick. It represents a not insignificant amount of potential for its mana cost, I'll say, if you get the Corrupted to turn on. Otherwise, its potential is more like a 1/1 with haste, and that's fairly low. Experimental Augury, no potential to win the game. Fleshless Gladiator, low potential. Can keep coming back from the graveyard, which is sort of like having more low potential creatures, only if you turn on the Corrupted. Not that impressed. Stinging Hivemaster, square deal. 3-power creatures for 3. These have been a constant part of making limited decks for a long, long time. Back in Kamigawa, which was a very aggressive format with Samurai, I remember making a deck full of 3-power ogres for 3 mana. And that deck did just fine. I believe it won its draft queue. This is a better card than those ogres were, but this is also a different format. Overall, in addition to, the 7 turns it would take with 3 power, the 10 turns it would take with the Toxic, it also can leave behind a Might, so it continues to add a little bit more threat behind it, even as it dies. This is a totally square deal at the 3 mana mark. Not busted, not, nothing fancy. Solid, though. Totally solid. Testament Bearer, on an uncontested board, would win the game in 5 turns. Unfortunately, a 1 toughness creature at 4 mana is very likely to be contested. It's very unlikely to connect with the opponent. So even though in a goldfish type of game, it's got square potential for its stats. A 4/4 for 4 is solid deal. This is a 4/1 for 4, and you just can't value it the same way. It replaces itself. It's not the worst. It's playable. Better on defense than offense, because anything at all can block it, other than a might. Quickdraft Aspirant. So 2/3 with Menace, makes your equipment spells cheaper, and it's cheaper to equip it. Does it win the game on its own? Over the course of 10 turns, kills the opponent. Menace makes it harder to block, so that's not nothing. Really, you need the synergies that exist on this card. You need an equipment deck. If you have an equipment deck, then the somewhat low potential of this card begins to ratchet upwards. A lot of the Formiridan equipments have very high equip costs. This makes it a better deal overall for both the front and back side of those cards. But it's a little low potential now at this early stage of the draft to pick it. Ruthless Predation, no potential. Dune Mover, low potential. It is not card advantage. It puts a card on the top of your library. You might have drawn a land anyway. So this can be a role player to fill your curve. You do need some way to get to your late game drops. Or, if you have an aggro deck plan where your plan is to swarm the opponent with low potential cards and tempo them out. This is fine. It trades with plenty of things. Has both power and toxic for 2 different clocks to threaten by. And it can get you a land if you have not drawn one yet. So, overall it's not a great card. Okay, so this is looks like a choice between these black creatures, which are square but not amazing, and these white creatures, the Bardiche and the Shepherd, which I think are much better. So, I said earlier that I believe the Shepherd has better potential than the Bardiche, and I will hold by it. I'm taking the Basilica Shepherd. Alright. Tamio's Immobilizer, no potential. Watchful Blister Zoa, decent. The clock is a little slower than like a 4/4 for 5. A 4/4 for 6. Clearly that takes at least 1 turn longer, if not more, to try to find your land drop. Being a flying creature, however, it's more likely to connect for combat damage. So in that regard, you could say it's at parity or stronger than a 4/4 for 5 would have been. Draws you a card when it dies. That's a nice bonus. If you proliferate, could be more. Square deal. Fair card. Doesn't knock my socks off, but it's fair for its mana cost. Slaughter Singer. Alright, so this card has 2 power, but the Toxic 2 we treat more like a 4 power creature in terms of killing the opponent. So, if this was a 4/2 for 2 mana, its potential to win the game at that mana value, that's very high for being a 2 mana card. And then it has this additional text whenever another creature you control with toxic attacks. It bolsters its power and toughness. Makes it more likely to get through for combat damage and quickens the damage clock. Not the toxic clock, but the damage clock. For its mana cost, this is a very powerful card in terms of potential. And when you find a low mana cost card that has high potential, you want to keep an eye on it. Because those are few and far between. Most of them are more like this Blister Zoa. Vanish into Eternity, no potential. Gitaxian Raptor. So, removing the oil counters, whether you do all three of them the first turn or whether you spread them out across multiple turns, quickens the clock by the same amount. It just gives you better options in terms of attacking and blocking to play with its power and toughness. And you might be able to proliferate it higher. Overall, with 3 oil counters, we can treat it as having 2 power 3 times. Or 4 power once. Let's go with 4 power once for how we'll treat it. So, attacks once for 4, and then it would take an additional 16 turns after that. So let's see. So, it's a faster clock than a 1 power card, but it's a slower clock than a 2 power card. A Wind Drake has a faster clock on the opponent than a Gitaxian Raptor. Unless you are able to just proliferate over the course of the entire game, and you could do that. If you get down a Thrumming Bird and then this Gitaxian Raptor, you could keep proliferating it, and then it would be more akin to a Wind Drake that has more options with its power and toughness. If you can proliferate it more than once a turn, it could even have more potential than a Wind Drake. That's unlikely, though. So, in total, I'm going to say that Gitaxian Raptor has low potential to win the game by itself. Prologue to Phyrexia, no potential, it's helper piece. Cruel Grimnarch, solid, square deal. The Death Touch, in particular, makes it hard for the opponent to block. And as we mentioned before, the card advantage with the discard, or the helping the damage race with the life gain, those are both good effects as well. This is fair for its mana cost, much like the Blister Zoa. They're both fair. The 5/5 Death Touch would probably value roughly as much as a 4/4 flyer. The opponent doesn't want to block either one of them. This one has a faster clock, this one's more likely to connect. They can find chump blocks or maybe trade with the Grimnarch more easily. Pestilent Siphoner. So, 1/1 flyer, the toxic one makes it more like a 2/1 flyer, though. So, over the course of 10 turns, can attack and win the game. At its mana value, being evasive, having flying, it's decent. It's a square deal. I talked about Vampire Interloper in my first draft as being not the worst in terms of pressuring the opponent, that it's alright for its mana cost. This is alright. It's alright. The clock isn't the best, it's not the worst either. And it's evasive. It's alright. Whisper of the Dross, no potential. Blazing Crescendo, no potential, it's just a helper piece. Predation Steward is a 2/2 on its own. Its activated ability can also pump up another creature. Assuming that we can use its activated ability profitably at some point in the game, without eating into the potential of our other cards, that at some point, somewhere, we'll have the 3 mana to do this at sorcery speed. It still taps to do that, so it's transferring its 2 power and toughness to another creature effectively, but that makes it more likely to connect with the opponent. So it's better than a plain 2/2 would be, for sure, but it's not a faster clock than a plain 2/2. So its potential is a bit low. Tyrannac's Atrocity. So this is a 4/4 for 5, it has haste, that takes a turn off the clock. So that makes it more like it was a 5/5, because you took a turn off of the clock. And the Toxic 3 makes it more like it has 6 power. And it has haste. So, doing a little bit of math here. A 6 power creature needs to connect 4 times with the opponent, and this is no different. Toxic 3 connects 3 times, that gets them to 9 poison counters. Which doesn't quite kill them. You still need 1 more poison counter. Alright, so 4 turns of attacking on its own. It can attack the first turn it attacks. This card has extremely high potential to win the game by itself. Extremely high. The amount of pressure this creates, the fact that it has haste, they might not have a good block for it the turn it comes down. Overall, this is an amazingly threatening card in terms of the potential to win the game. Spectacular. Okay, so this pick is basically between Tyrannux Atrocity, the Grimnarch, the Blisterzoa, and the Slaughter Singer. And I think the Slaughter Singer and the Atrocity are in a whole nother category, another step up. The Grimnarch and the Blisterzoa are fair, the Singer and the Atrocity are not fair. They are ahead of curve, above rate. So, Atrocity comes down turn 5, wins the game in 4 attacks. That would be turn 9. Singer comes down turn 2, wins the game in 5 attacks. That would be turn 7. If you have even the slightest bit of Proliferate or one other poison counter that gets on the opponent, the Atrocity could get there, let's see, in 3 attacks. That would be turn 7. So the Atrocity could have the same clock as the Singer. The Atrocity is a larger, more threatening card. It's harder to deal with in combat than a 2/2 is. The Singer comes down on turn 2, and it's very unusual to find a high potential card on 2 mana. It's much more common to find a high potential card at 5 mana. So they are roughly on par. They're somewhere in the same ballpark with each other. And I think when that's the case, you take the lower mana one because it's such a rarity, and it's so hard to build a good curve with high potential. So I believe here we take the Slaughter Singer. Alright. Churning Reservoir. So it has no potential on its own when you get to deck building synergy. Or if you get later in the draft and you have a lot of things with oil counters on them, and you know you can reliably activate the 2 mana ability of this card. If you reach the point with deck building synergy where this card is just on, almost all the time it's on, then the card, you can't really value the oil counters until you have all that synergy built in. But if the deck was turned on and this card was turned on for its 2 mana activation, making a 2/2 every turn, I'd say it's nigh impossible to activate it on turn 2. Well, let's say you play, there are creatures like the Rustvine Cultivator that can add and remove oil counters. There's a red creature that can tap to discard and draw with a Rummage. So let's say by turn 3, you could start activating the Reservoir reliably. in a deck that just is absolutely packed to the brim with oil. If you can start activating it by turn 3, then on turn 3, makes a 1/1. Turn 4, the opponent takes 1. You add another creature every turn. So turn 4, the opponent takes 1. Turn 5, the opponent takes another 2. Goes to 3. Turn 6, the opponent takes another 3, goes to 6 damage. Turn 7, takes another 4, goes to 10 damage. Turn 8, takes another 5 damage, goes to 15. Turn 9, they're dead. Alright, so let's see. Turn 9. So a 2/2 would win over the course of 10 turns. So in a perfect scenario where you actually want to activate it every turn like that, and it's not the mana activation, it's not eating away too much into the potential of your other cards. You make all these goblins, and it would win the game faster in this ideal deck than a 2/2 for 1 mana would. That's not bad. That's not bad potential. But you need everything to fall into place just so, and it costs a ton of mana to do it. Still, for its mana cost, I would say its potential is not bad with all of the deck building synergy falling into place. You don't take it in a stage like this of the draft and hope that your deck building synergies fall into place. You take it when you know they have fallen into place and that this card can unlock that potential. You don't wager on it. Resistant Skywarden, high potential. Reach makes it good as a blocker, Menace makes it good as an attacker. Hard to deal with. 2 creatures block it, probably they have to block with something they didn't want to. Attacks over the course of 4 turns to win the game. So it comes down turn 5, wins on turn 9. And is very likely to connect as a 5/5, whereas a 2/2 with no abilities could not necessarily connect in the same way that this could. This card is fair, it's maybe even slightly above rate for its mana cost. Costs double red though. That's something to keep in mind. We're not married to any color yet at this stage of the draft. The Murex is keeping us open, and we will pivot as we need to into a color that's open if we need. We will go where the potential is. But at some point, we'll solidify into colors. This is a very good card, though. Duelist of Deep Faith. Toxic one, first strike as long as it's your turn. This card's hard to block. It's hard to stop, at least in the early part of the game. And it threatens the clock of Toxic, which is a little bit better of a clock than damage, because life gain doesn't stop it. This is certainly better than a plain 2/2 for 2. For its mana cost, this isn't terrible. It's also not amazing. The clock is the same, it's just that it's more likely to connect. And it can do it with poison as well as damage. It's not bad. Glistener Seer, no potential, 0 power. Infectious Inquiry, no potential. Blazing Crescendo, no potential. Free from Flesh, no potential. And all of these cards, not to say that they're necessarily bad. In a deck that's full of good synergies for them, you might run them, but you don't prioritize taking them. Furnace Skullbum, no potential. Branch Blight Stalker, high potential. So a 3-1 for 2 already threatens 7 attacks to win the game, but Toxic 2 actually quickens that clock. It makes it more like it's a 4-power creature for 2. So if it connects just 5 times, it will kill the opponent by itself. That is enormously threatening for a 2-drop. It has incredibly high potential for its mana value. So, we're definitely going to be looking at this. Plague Nurse. So 3-4 for 4, Toxic 2. So damage-wise, its clock is slower than its Toxic clock. And it has the activated ability that each other creature you control with Toxic gains Toxic 1. Multiple instances stack. You can only activate it once per turn. So this speeds up the clock of your other toxic creatures, and it's square. Square deal at its mana cost as a threat. Completely fair. 4-4 for 4 is what you're looking for, and the Toxic 2 is like 4 power in terms of the clock. May be able to use its activated ability with other creatures to quicken the clock. It's a potential upside. The 4 toughness makes it more likely it can attack in. Overall, this is a fair card. Square deal. Good at its mana cost. Rustvine Cultivator. Very low potential. Right? Attacking for 20 turns to win the game. This card is more of a synergy piece. If we draft up a deck and it's got a high mana curve, and that's likely with the way that potential works, then we'll probably be looking for Rustvine Cultivators later in the draft, when we have enough 5, 6, 7 drops and we need to get to them. We need early turn plays and we need mana ramp. At that point, the synergy and the mana curve will start to matter more than the individual potential of the card. But right now we're looking at potential. So, for this pack, it's between Resistant Skywarden, Branch Blight Stalker, and Plague Nurse. And again, when you can find a high potential card at a low mana cost, it's always impressive. It's just more rare than finding a high potential card up at 4 and 5 mana cost. We're not married to green yet as a color. This does synergize well with our Slaughter Singer and the Shepherd. The Shepherd makes these mites, and those go well with the Singer. Overall, the Stalker, because of its potentially incredible clock as a 2-drop, I think is the take here. Alright, so I went into great detail on Reservoir before. For us, basically no potential at the moment. Zealot's Conviction, low potential. And I don't like card disadvantage of auras. This one is a combat trick. They're starting to do that more often with auras. Gulping Scrap Trap, square deal. Fair card. Decent potential. Not bad. Stinging Hive Master, again. This is a square deal. Chimney Rabble. So, representing 4 power and toughness for 4 mana is a square deal, but the haste can potentially quicken the clock. It changes up the math just a little bit in favor of the card, more so than it otherwise would. So this is basically fair. It's on rate and maybe a little bit ahead of rate. Copper Longlegs, low potential. More of a synergy piece. If you end up building a high curve deck and you need some early drops to get to your high curve, that's when you start taking the Longlegs. I'm not going to take it early in a draft. Maze Skull Bomb, no potential. Tyrannex Atrocity, high potential. Love this card. Slaughter Singer got the nod last time because it was 2 mana and this was 5. But this is a great card in terms of potential to win the game by itself. Surgical Bay, no potential. Terramorphic Expanse, no potential. Okay. So for this pack, we're between the Scrap Trap, Hive Master, Rabble, and the Atrocity, and I think the Atrocity is in another class compared to these other cards. I think this is just a big step up from where these other ones are sitting. We're going to take the Tyrannex Atrocity. Alright, Ravenous Necro-Titan. High potential. 6 power at 4 is, even without all the mana sink, this is a faster clock than Mirrex. It's pretty incredibly high potential. It's double black, though. We could still pivot if black is open, and in this pack at least black is a bit open. We've got another big creature and a combat trick here. So the Necro-Titan, I don't like the double black in this case with what we've already chosen. It might end up being the highest potential card in the pack. We'll see if that's reason enough to take it. Oxida Finisher. So, as a 7-drop, 3 attacks wins the game. That happens by turn 10. It's very likely to connect, very hard to stop in combat because it's a 7/5 trampler. And if your deck has equipment, if you start to synergize with this card and get it down on a sooner turn, the clock is just that much faster. If you get it to be a 6-drop, wins by turn 9. Get it to be a 5-drop, wins by turn 8. And it's very hard to stop it. And if you have those equipment in your deck, you can move them over to this card and make it even harder to stop. So not only could its potential be high in a deck that has synergy with it, it could be even higher just because of the cards you're running for that synergy. This card isn't bad. With what we've already drafted, though, it's double red pips, and we don't have any equipment yet, so I don't think it's the take here. But I am not snubbing this card. For the right deck, the potential could be sky high. Drop this on turn 5, and you've got a heck of a beater. That is, I mean, on turn 5, this would be even faster than the Tyrannex Atrocity. And a 7/5 trampler. Mandible Justicar. Not bad. Square deal for 2 mana, I'll say. And might tokens are artifacts. Yes. So we don't have much synergy with it yet, we just have a tiny bit. But it's not impossible that we could get there. Oh, Mirrex makes might tokens as well. That's a neat interaction. Not the worst. Not the worst. Right now, we're looking like toxic synergy would be better. This can still help race with the opponent, though, and these creatures all still threaten some kind of clock with their power. Meldweb Strider. Okay, this comes down turn 5. It can crew itself once, so it can attack for 5 once without even eating into the potential of your other cards. That is a nice trait. And then it starts eating into the potential of another one of your creatures to be a 5/5 Vigilance for 5. Now, don't get me wrong, 5/5 Vigilance for 5 is very nice. That is a perfectly solid, on-rate, good creature. Compares reasonably favorably with the Shepherd and the Atrocity, except that it's a vehicle. It's got the one-time trick that it does. Maybe if you proliferate, it could just be that 5/5, in which case it's quite good. If you're not proliferating, then it takes a little bit of the shine off of it. Not bad, though. Probably fair in terms of potential. Cruel Grimnarch, fair for its mana value, 5/5 Death Touch. Fair card. Necro-Titan's better for being in black. Offer Immortality, no potential. Aspirant. Low potential, and we don't seem to be drafting up an equipment deck at the moment. Rustvine Cultivator, low potential, might synergize well with our deck. We already have a couple of 5-drops. The oil doesn't really do anything for us, but the mana might. So that'd be more of a synergy take than just a curve filler as a 1-drop. Terramorphic Expanse, no potential. Okay. So we've taken green and white cards so far. They're starting to dry up a little bit in this pack. This could be a moment where we choose to pivot. If we choose to pivot, the highest potential cards in the pack are the Necrotitan, the Finisher, the Strider, and the Grimnark. Grimnark's easier to splash if black ended up being a splash color. Necrotitan's by far the stronger card. Although I should say with the Necrotitan that if you don't have Corrupted, it eats into the potential of one of your other cards because you have to sacrifice a creature. So it turns off another card's potential, and it is a card disadvantage unless you have Corrupted. If we wanted to stay in the deck, we'd take the Justicar or the Cultivator, which don't have much synergy with us and are low potential. Alright, I think we are going to branch out into black here. The question is whether we take this imminently splashable card. By the time you reach 6 mana, it's very likely you'll have found your splash color by then. Or the not as splashable and much more dangerous Ravenous Necrotitan. So I think we go with the highest potential card in this case. If we end up pivoting into black, Grimnarks probably will go late in this draft. We'll probably end up with as many as we want. We don't know that for sure, but the Necrotitan might not be quite as ready of a wheel card. Might not pick them up as late in a draft. If we end up in black, we'll be happy we took this. Alright, Exuberant Fuseling. So, as 1-drops go, its clock initially is very slow, but once your other creatures and artifacts start dying, it gains oil counters. That bolsters its power, quickens its clock, and it has trample. So it's likely to connect. It's also likely to trade with something, though. It's likely to die in combat when it attacks. Still, for its mana cost, if you had any kind of oil counter synergy, or if you know you're going to be playing this with other, 2 and 3 drops and things, and it's likely there's going to be a lot of stuff trading and dying in combat, as a 1-drop, this card's potential can grow over time, and that's good for a 1-drop. For its mana value, I'm going to say its potential is pretty high. Requires a little bit of synergy, though, to really get it ticking. Mesmerizing Dose, no potential. Prologue, no potential. Spellbomb, no potential. Fall, no potential. Steward, low potential. Better than a plain Jane Grizzly Bears, though. Titanic Growth, no potential. Mere Custodian, low potential. A 2-3 is more likely to get through in combat than a 2-2, but this one comes down a turn sooner, and it has a slow sorcery speed. Kind of pump. I won't call it a combat trick because it's an on-board trick. The opponent sees it coming. Alright, so potential of cards in this pack are all pretty low for our pick 7 here. I think we take the Predation Steward. I think it's got the best potential of any card in this pack, and it is in colors that we have chosen up to this point. Don't feel like pivoting into a red 1-drop just at the moment. Right, Plated Onslaught. No potential. This card, so the moment this wins you the game is when you are attacking with enough creatures that the damage this causes goes up to lethal. That's not impossible, but you need to go wide with your board. This is very much a synergy piece card. It does not win the game by itself. So I would really like the deck to be more solidified, to know that we are going wide, to know that we have all these mites. Mirrex helps. Shepherd helps. We have some cheap creatures. But I don't want to take this spell until I'm pretty confident that it's one of our only, tricks like this. I don't want to have a deck full of this. Prologue, no potential. Grimnark, fair. Fair for its mana value. Pretty decent, likely to connect as a 5/5 Death Toucher. Aspirant, fairly low. We don't have any red cards or equipment right now. Cultivator could boost our mana. It's very low potential, doesn't synergize with Toxic. If we end up going into black here, ironically we might have a little less toxic and a little more damage with cards like Necrotitan and Grimnark. Cultivator can help us get to those big cards. So low potential, but a synergy piece. Drawspit's no potential, Hunter Maze no potential. Okay. This pick is between Cruel Grimnark and Rustvine Cultivator. And this is a hard choice. I feel it's likely that a lot of Cruel Grimnarks are going to go around late in draft picks. Black feels somewhat open. These aren't the worst green cards here either. We're still in pack 1, our colors are not solidified. The Grimnark is by far the higher potential card to the Cultivator. The Cultivator could get us to our high potential cards and unlock cards like Cruel Grimnark. If we take this now, we might be more likely to be able to play Grimnarks in the future. And we certainly don't know that we're in black yet. Also, don't know with certainty that we're in green-white. We've got 3 green cards, 1 green-white card, 1 just white card. It's a very hard choice. I think we're going to have the opportunity to pick up more of these later. I think I'm going to take the Cultivator now. I have some misgivings about this, but I'm going to see if we can still make a green-white deck, potentially. Alright. No potential, no potential, no potential. Square deal. Square deal. Low potential. Okay. We're between 2 black cards. Alright, we have taken a mana ramper. We have 4 green cards that are not white. We do have some toxic. The proliferate on this scrap trap is perhaps not irrelevant. We also have this oil counter card now. So, we could proliferate onto it, and that's not irrelevant either. The Grimnark is more generically good than the scrap trap. They share the same clock, but I think a 5/5 Death Touch is more likely to get in than a 4/4. This one has more synergy with poison. This one, I think, is the stronger card in total. I think we take the stronger card in total. Already have some 5-drops, so it'd be interesting to have some 6-drops. Unnatural Restoration, no potential. Ribskiff. Square Deal may be a little bit underrate for its mana value because it requires crewing. Solid's Conviction, low potential. Not the worst if you get corrupted, though. Fleshless Gladiator, low potential. Dune Mover, low potential. Alright. So in terms of potential, turning on the Corrupted on Conviction, making something get +2/+1 in first strike, would be pretty amazing at the point of 1 mana, if we have Corrupted. Ribskiff is more generically good, and we're a little bit uncertain about our colors. I'm still not sure if black is going to feature in this deck. I'm not a big fan of auras. This one is a combat trick. It's got flash. This could be very good, but I still don't like the potential card disadvantage it has. People prioritize removal quite highly in Limited, normally. I don't. But... So Ribskiff, I think the Zealot's Conviction has slightly more potential in terms of pure damage. The Ribskiff can also do Toxic. It replaces itself with a draw, and it's colorless, which is nice with our color uncertainty. So we're going to take the Ribskiff here. Okay. Vanish, no potential. Grimnark, Square Deal. Whisper, no potential. Blazing Crescendo. It's Grimnark. I thought we'd get some late. Okay, Cultivator's coming around late. These red cards have no potential. We're taking the Cultivator. Got 2 pieces of mana ramp here. Alright, so like I said earlier, you're not going to pick Copper Longlegs early, but if what we want to do is build up to mana costs of 6 in this deck, Copper Longlegs will help shut down our opponent's little 1/1 flyers, and there's a lot of them in the format. Or there's the 2/1 flyer in blue-black you would definitely love to have a reach creature for. For that reason, it can synergize with a go big strategy to help stall the board. And for that reason, and also it has at least some potential, and this card has none. And blue is not in our colors. The last pick, Cultivator. That might make the main. We'll see. Alright, Spell Dancer. So, can't be blocked. So it has a 10-turn clock, but the opponent can't get in the way of it. So over those 10 turns, it will win the game, unless they kill it with a removal spell, something out of combat. Unblockable creatures are nice in this regard. You can value them more highly even than a 2/2 flyer, or a 2-power flyer, or a Toxic 1 flyer. Because can't be blocked is even better than flying. The opponent very well might have reach or flying in their deck. Now that being said, the clock's not that fast. The oil counters can let you copy an instant or sorcery. You really can't depend on that when you take the card. You don't know about how those synergies are going to line up until later. It's not bad for its mana value, though. Not in our colors. Transplant Theorist, low potential. So 2/4 for 4 is not bad for adding a body to the battlefield as a blocker, kind of stall up the board to get to your end game, but overall it's just a low potential card. Has trouble damaging the opponent effectively as a 4-drop. Feed the Infection, no potential. Resistant Skywarden, high potential. Not in our colors though. I think we are far enough along to know that we're either going to be green-white or green-black. And with that in mind, double red pips is no longer on the menu. We're still early in pack 2, but going with a double red card here would be such a long shot. So I'm not going to lean that direction. Crawling Chorus. So you can treat this sort of like a 2-1 because of the Toxic. And players, again, can't heal that poison damage, so it's more deadly than a 2-1. It doesn't trade with creatures in combat as effectively as a 2-1, but for potential, it counts. And it leaves behind a Phyrexian Might token, which gives it a lingering potential, more so than a 2-1 would normally have. For its mana value, this is a square deal. For being a 1-drop, this is pretty threatening. I've seen more threatening 1-drops, but this ain't bad. Duelist of Deep Faith. More likely to get through than the Crawling Chorus. The clock starts a turn later. And it doesn't leave behind a Might, but the first strike when attacking and just having 2 power and toughness. It's a little bit of a close call, but I think the Duelist is perhaps more likely to go the distance than the Crawling Chorus is, even leaving behind the Might. Aspirant's Ascent, no potential. Cutthroat Centurion. So if you can make it a 4-power creature for 3, then it is above rate. This requires sacrificing a creature every turn, or an artifact. So if you had a bunch of 4 Mirrodin equipment, that wouldn't be the worst. You wouldn't have to sacrifice creatures at least. And it would give you 2 things to sacrifice. So a 4/4 for 3 is above rate. So it's got a decent potential to win the game. By itself, you can kind of assume you have other creatures in your deck, but you can also assume that this is at the cost of pretty much all of your other potential. Pretty much sacrifice everything to get it to be a 4/4 for the entire game to kill the opponent. And that is eating into the potential of your other cards too much. At the cost of all of them to make this one good, I don't think that's a very good trade. So I'd say this card is probably more so-so. Fleshless Gladiator, kind of lowish potential. Even if you can return it, it's still not incredibly threatening. Not the easiest to get through. Coming back so many times, though, it's kind of like it represents a bunch of low potential cards. It just can't go wide, though. Barbed Batterfist, for its mana cost. A 3-1. A 3-1 for 2 mana. Attacks over 7 turns to win the game. That's not the worst. Having 1 toughness, it's not likely to go the distance. But then the Batterfist can go on to other creatures and continue to quicken the clock. This isn't bad. It's not bad, for its mana value. Again, red's not in our colors. Skull Bomb, no potential. Copper Long Legs, low potential. Prismatic Prism, Prophetic Prism. No potential. Drawspits, no potential. Okay. So we're choosing between white and black as our other color. Our only green card here is not good. We could take it just to signal that green is closed in pack 2. But I think this is a good enough signal on its own. I can't really go in for the blue and red cards. We've, if we make a 3-color deck, that's as many colors as we can go in limited, really. We can't go into blue and red. Not unless they're wide open, and we find that out quickly in pack 2. So with a bad green card, we're going to look at our black and white options, which are also not great. We've got the Gladiator, the Centurion. I think the Centurion has a little bit more potential than the Gladiator. It's a little bit of a close call. The 2 of them synergize with each other as well. This is more likely to make better attacks and blocks and trades and going wide with your board, etc. This has a little bit more inevitability. I think the pump on this one is probably better than the inevitability on this one. And in white, we've got the Crawling Chorus and the Duelist of Deep Faith, and I think those are better. I think both of those are better than our black options here. Between the Duelist of Deep Faith and the Crawling Chorus, I feel like the Duelist of Deep Faith has a stronger chance to get there than the Crawling Chorus does, even though it's a slightly slower clock. I'm going to take the Duelist. Alright. Bladed Ambassador. Good for its mana cost. Solid. Doesn't synergize with our Toxic, but it's a square deal potential-wise at 2 mana. Infectious Bite, no potential. Paladin of Predation, enormous. Enormous potential. So it cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, which means they also can't gang up with a bunch of creatures with power 2 or less to help the blocks be better. This means they can pretty much only block with their bigger creatures against the Paladin of Predation. It has Toxic 6, which means after 2 attacks, the opponent is dead. And it's like it has 12 power in that regard. That's pretty amazing. Comes down at 7, wins 2 turns later, turn 9, and it's very hard to stop. They can't chump block it with their little things, and it's at 6/7, it's hard enough for their big things to trade effectively with it as well. Duelist, not bad for its mana cost. Indoctrination Attendant. So this represents 4 total power, 5 total toughness, Toxic 2, and requires bouncing something, which could be a benefit or could be a detriment. It's kind of a wash, right, in terms of the bounce effect. You could use it in your favor, or it might not set you back, or it might set you back a little. In which case you might not bounce something. You might just play it as the 3/4, and that would be okay. I think this is perfectly solid. I think this is fair for its mana value. Respectable. Chrome Prowler. 3 power for 3 is always a square deal. The flash and the tapping trick is nice. Those are nice additions to a fair card. Not going into blue or red, most likely. Malcator's Watcher, low potential to win the game. It can combo with another card that exists in the format, and if you know that synergy exists, then it's you can start rating it differently. There's a creature called Unctus's Retrofitter, I think. 2/3 for 3, and it can turn an artifact into a 4/4 creature. This would make this a 4/4 flying vigilant creature. If you have that synergy, or especially if you have more than one of the Retrofitter, you can start valuing these more highly at that point. But until the synergy exists, you have to value it low. Quicksilver Fisher, solid. 4 power flyer for 5. I'm going to say it's a square deal. Right about on rate. None. Low. The Death Touch lets it get through very often, and the Toxic treats it more like it has 2 power rather than 1. So, not the worst. Not the worst. Good defensive creature as well. It's okay. Mirror Kinsmith. So if you have other Mirror, including other Mirror Kinsmith, right, this can fetch up multiple Mirror Kinsmith, and it can keep fetching itself. Overall, a 3 power creature for 4 is okay. The 1 toughness is bad. It trades well in combat as a blocker. If you go wide with your board, then representing a threat of 3 power for 4 is okay. And if it keeps getting you more 3 power for 4, that's okay. I don't think it's great, but it's okay. Alright, so this is between the Indoctrination Attendant and the Paladin of Predation. This card is good. Perfectly fair. We really don't have 3 and 4 drops to speak of at the moment. Don't know if we're going into black at all. Black looks like it's dried up in this pack at the moment. So we're probably going into white, and we will need those 3 and 4 drops eventually. But Predation, Paladin of Predation, if we end up sticking more with the toxic game plan, and even if we don't, this card just, in 2 hits on its own, just, kills the opponent. We're still at the beginning of Pack 2. I think we have time to worry about our mana curve later. We have 3 mana ramp pieces that have already shown up here. We're taking the Paladin of Predation. Alright, Necrosquito, good. This is good. It just starts out as a 2/2 flyer for 4, which isn't the best. But whenever another creature or artifact you control dies, you put an oil counter on this, and that boosts its power and toughness. At the point this becomes a 3/3 flyer for 4, it's quite good. That is a really good deal on a flyer. And if it gets any larger than that, then it's above rate for limited. At that point, it's gotten past being fair once it gets to 4. And creatures should probably be trading and dying in combat. It's probably will be happening. This card is good. I think it's above rate probably at 4 mana. Requires just a little bit of synergy to happen, mostly in the form of creatures trading in combat and dying and such. As long as you're not going card advantage negative, as long as you're kind of staying at parity with your trades in combat, then Necrosquito's naturally going to turn into an on-rate or above-rate threat. I like it. Cacophony Scamp. So this is fair as a 1-drop. Has a long clock to kill the opponent. It's more of a tool for trading with a 2-drop or trading with a pair of 1 toughness things. Could also maybe proliferate with it. It's okay. 1-drops really don't have much potential most of the time anyway. This one doesn't either. But it's good as a blocker. It's probably good for synergies that exist in a red deck. None. Okay. If it was only a 1/3 flyer for 2, I would say it had low potential, but we have a lot of toxic that we're looking at if we go green-white. Now we only have 3 white cards at the moment, and we have 3 black cards. Things could still change, and black is more open this pack. Glare's a good piece of removal. Scourge is a perfectly solid card. If you turn on the Corrupted, the lifelink helps you win a damage race. The Death Touch helps it get through. As a flyer, it already gets through pretty well. It's not bad. Grimnark is a square deal. These white cards are not bad either. People value combat tricks reasonably highly that aren't me. And Incisor Glider, I think people like this card in this format, right? And I think if we hit Corrupted, which is reasonably likely, being able to give all creatures we control +1/+1 when this attacks including itself, means it goes on rate or above rate at the point it's attacking as a 2/4 flyer in the air. Right, that puts itself above rate, because a 4 toughness means it's more likely to be able to swing you. And 2 power at 2 mana is fair. And pumping up all the other creatures we have could be amazing. It's a little bit hard to value that with potential, but I think it could exist in this deck. Anatomist, very low potential. Glare, none. Scourge, decent. Grimnarch, good. Slinger, low. Doesn't have any kind of evasion or anything. Spore Singer, low. Its clock is 1 turn quicker with the +2/+2 in Vigilance. So in that regard, it's sort of like it gets haste, in a way. Except it's more likely to connect because it makes one of your other creatures kind of impossible to trade with in combat. It's very likely that creature will connect. Overall, it's sort of like a 2/2 with haste in terms of how much damage it deals to the opponent and how quickly. Vigilance is not nothing, but this card's... yeah. No. I'm going to call it kind of low potential overall. Branch Blight Stalker, high potential. I'm very impressed with the Toxic 2 on a 2-drop. And the Cultivator's low, we already have 3 copies. So this is between Branch Blight Stalker and the Incisor Glider, I think. These black cards aren't bad, but I think these two are much better, and they're at a low mana cost. So let's see, just how much Toxic do we have? Not the Cultivators. This, not this, not this, this. Because I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards so far with Toxic. That's starting to turn into a theme. I think the Incisor Glider could turn on. And by bolstering the team, I think it could have more potential than the Branch Blight Stalker, and the flying is more evasive. In a vacuum, this kills the opponent faster. But I think I'm going to take the Incisor Glider here. I think the synergy is starting to win out a little bit over the Stalker. Might be leaning towards white a little bit. We'll see what happens. Ambulatory Edifice. So 3 power for 3 is fair. It's on rate, nothing spectacular. The ability to give a creature -1/-1, and we have a choice to do that. We may pay 2 life, we don't have to. Can make combat math harder, can kill a Might, can kill a 1 toughness flyer, kill things like Testament Bearer. It seems like there's a lot of live targets for this effect, and it's on a creature which threatens the opponent on its own. Usually that's rough to get. We don't take a lot of removal spells because we're prioritizing potential. But this could be on a creature. That's nice. Cankerbloom. Cankerbloom has even higher potential as a 3/2 for 2 than the Edifice does as a 3/2 for 3. Could also potentially kill something of the opponent's artifact or enchantment. Can proliferate Toxic. That could be the point that's needed to win the game. Edifice could be a piece of interaction. They're both good. Yeah, they're both good. Edifice deals with creatures, Cankerbloom more so deals with non-creatures. But this one has a faster clock. It's the higher potential card. I think the Cankerbloom's better than the Edifice. It's a close call there. no potential. Need the deck for it. If you can reliably turn this into a 4/4 every single turn, then that's above rate. 4/4 for 3. Probably hard to pull off turning it on every turn. If you had a card like Phyrexia in your deck, you could do it. We're not in blue though. Eldweb Strider, that was fair. Fair potential. Grimnark, it's good. Duress 9. Testament Bearer, E. We'll call it middling because of the 1 toughness. None. Fair because of the toxic. I like the death touch on it too. Middling at best. Okay. So the black cards are definitely stronger in this pack. Black is looking more open. I think especially with this edifice here. I feel like someone would have nabbed that already. Keep going back and forth on whether we're in white or black. White or black. I'm leaning a little bit towards white at this point. We have these toxic payoff cards like the Slaughter Singer and the Incisor Glider. There's quite a bit of toxic here. The black creatures are very serviceable, but this one's double pips, and there's no toxic going on with our black cards yet. This one wouldn't be either. So, I haven't totally made up our minds yet as far as black and white. But I think I'm leaning more towards taking a green card here in this pack, because white's leaning a little bit. So it's between the Basilisk and the Cankerbloom. Cankerbloom would be another 2-drop. At 3 power, 2 toughness, it's got decent potential for its mana cost. Has some nice tricks it can do when it sacrifices. It doesn't really play into our toxic cards. The Basilisk is not as high potential, doesn't have the other modes of Cankerbloom, does play into our toxic. And the Basilisk, it's a better blocker, actually, than the Cankerbloom is. The 3 toughness and the death touch. This can stop cards like, for instance, the Duelist of Deep Faith, or the piece of equipment that makes a 2/2 and has trample and first strike on your turn. The Basilisk would stop that more effectively. It's a really close call. It was a really close call between Cankerbloom and the Basilisk. We don't have any green cards yet. I mean, any 3-drops. We don't have any 3-drops yet. We have so many 2-drops. Normally, higher mana cards tend to have more impact on the game than lower mana cards. I think in this case it's the Death Touch and the Toxic. I think the Basilisk, because of synergy reasons, is actually the take for this deck. I like these 2 up here, though. I think the Basilisk is the take. I think we start to lean into the synergy a bit here. Oh my goodness. Okay, basically no green cards. Furnace Strider is good, but it's not in our colors. The Pestilent Siphoner is fine, right? If we were still going to go into black, this is fine. But it doesn't wow me in some of the ways these white 2-drops are. I think they're better. And then we have all these white cards, and it's kind of telling us that white is open here. Okay, so we've got the Annex Sentry. So with Toxic 1, this is sort of like it has 2 power, which makes it not the worst as a 3-drop. The 4 toughness can let it get in sometimes for an attack. And the fact that it's a removal spell on a body is also nice. I was talking about that with the Ambulatory Edifice, I think that's called. But this Annex Sentry helps our toxic theme. that is a nice package overall there. Infested Flesh Cutter. Infested Flesh Cutter has the highest potential of any card in this pack to win the game by itself. That might sound stupid, but you equip it onto something and it's bolstered its power by 2, and it can attack immediately, presumably. And when it does, then it creates a 1/1, so you've added 3 power onto the board the very moment that you equip an attack. And then, if that creature is dealt with, you can put the Flesh Cutter onto the Might, and the Might can attack and make another Might, and so on and so forth. And you don't have to keep re-equipping it if they don't deal with the creature it's on. It can be very mana intensive to use, but it isn't necessarily. If I wanted to do some math to figure out how quickly this could end the game. Alright, so let's say you have a 1-drop. And we do, Rustvine Cultivator. Turn 2, we play Flesh Cutter. Turn 3, we equip it. It begins to swing. Alright, so that turn, the opponent takes 3 damage. Make a Might. The turn after that, the opponent takes 4 damage. They're up to 7. Make another Might. Then the turn after that, they take 5 damage. They're up to 12. Make a Might. They're also gaining poison over this. Then 6 damage, they're up to 18. We make a Might, and then they're just dead. Dead, dead, dead. And plus, you can move this around to different creatures, boost their power, give them more potential to win the game. This card's a beating. And it's pretty great synergy-wise with the lifelink 2-mana artifact creature. Because when artifacts enter the battlefield, it pumps it. So this being on it pumps its power to 4, then the Might pumps its power to 5. It has lifelink. Likely the opponent will trade with it in combat, but a 10-point life swing is nothing to sneeze at. So Basilica Shepherd. I've gone over this one already before. It's 5 power, 2 toxic for 5 mana. A 3/3 flyer. Is more likely to be able to get in. Also, if we take another one of these, there's a possibility that our board is just going to go very wide at a point in the game. That'll make it more likely that we can corrupt the opponent for the Incisor Glider. It would also mean that there'd be more creatures for the glider to pump. It's overall a good creature. Fair deal, maybe even a little bit above rate. And the Lightbringer, currently we don't have any equipment. It's a fair card though. A 3/2 for 3 with Ward is, it's on rate, basically. And if you equip it, it becomes better. That's, then it's pretty good. To be a 4/3 plus whatever the equipment gives it. Alright, so we are scant on 3 and 4 drops. I've already got a couple of 5s. If we don't end up in black, then we don't have these 6s, we just go to a 7 here. In terms of potential, I think it's between the Flesh Cutter and the Shepherd. But we also have our mana curve to consider. Having a 1/4 for 3 that can remove a creature while still being something of a threat, having some amount of potential. I love the Infested Flesh Cutter. I think this is just a shining beacon, an example of how much potential a card can have in this format. And the Shepherd is great. Absolutely, don't get me wrong. Is double white pips, so that's definitely a commitment. I think here I take the Annex Sentry. It still synergizes with our Toxic. It gives us a spot on our curve that we need at the 3-drop, and it is a removal spell. And being able to do all of that at the same time, I think it's what we want right now for the deck. Alright, Font of Progress. Can this win the game by itself? Yes, but it's slow. I think if you proliferate onto this card, let's see. So mill cards require a bit of higher math to figure out how quickly they win the game. This card by itself, let's say you started activating at turn 3 and you kept activating it every turn at that point. And we're going to assume that you didn't proliferate onto it. We're going to take the baseline first. So at a baseline, by turn 3, depending on whether the opponent is on the play or on the draw, they have drawn 7 cards. There have been 2 more turns since then. We'll assume that you do this on your turn 3. They are 9 cards deep into their deck, basically, out of 40. You activate Font of Progress, that puts them to 11. And then, so that's 11 at turn 3. Then it's another 3 cards for the rest of the game. Because they draw 1 card per turn, you mill them 2 cards per turn. So, 11 cards at turn 3. It goes 3 a turn after that. There are 29 more cards to get through. So, 10 turns at that point. Yeah. So, after turn 3, there are 10 more turns. So turn 13 is when the Font of Progress would mill them out. Now you can proliferate onto it. Let's say you even manage to do it on turn 2. Let's say you have the Augury spell. You draw your best of your top 3 cards, proliferate, and you get a counter onto this, and then you activate this for every turn. So from a baseline of 3 mill, plus they draw a card every turn, they would be 12 cards deep at turn 3. It would be 4 cards a turn, every turn after that. And you'd have 28 cards to get through. That would be 7 activations at that point. Turn 10. So proliferating onto this once quickens the clock by 3 turns. Noticeable improvement. Let's say that you proliferate onto the font twice, but you don't get your first activation of it until turn 5. That seems pretty reasonable to me. You probably have lots of interacting with the opponent and plays to make in the early turns of the game. You drop this on 1, cast your spells, do some things, make some proliferation. So you proliferate onto it twice, and turn 5, you start activating it where it's a mill of 4 per turn. So by turn 5, draw 7 cards plus 5 more. It's 12 plus the mill is 4 at this point. So 16 cards deep at turn 5. There's 24 cards left. You go 5 cards a turn. It'd be 5 more turns. It'd be turn 10 again. Obviously, it's better if you can proliferate onto it faster and activate it before turn 5. In the example where you have thrumming birds, and the thrumming birds aren't being blocked, and the thrumming birds proliferate onto this, like, let's say, 4 times, then the clock on this is probably so fast it might be a reasonable threat at that point. By itself, it's mana intensive, and the clock is pretty slow. It can win the game by itself, but I think you can do better. Duelist of Deep Faith. For its mana cost, solid card. Zealot's Conviction. If I didn't have the Duelist here, I would certainly consider this. None. Fair. Low. Square deal. Low. None. Okay. So, unless we want to lean back into black, and at this point I don't think we're going to. I think at this point we have made our choice. I think we're going green-white. We're going to take the Duelist of Deep Faith here. Stay in our colors. Alright, Enchanted Creature has Toxic too. This is like giving a creature 4 additional power with haste. Okay, frankly, this card is phenomenal, actually. Necrogen Communion is a heck of a beating. So even if the creature didn't have Toxic, you just had like your, there's a little 1 mana, 1/2 Vigilant Flyer in white, let's say, and you put this on it on turn 2 and started attacking right then, that would quicken the clock down to 5 turns, so turn 6 would be the win by itself, with 1 creature to put it on. That's relatively evasive. That's great. Plus, when the creature dies, you return it to the battlefield under your control. I like this. This is good. This is very good. I feel like we've stepped pretty deep into white cards at this point. And these don't do anything for our Toxic game plan over here. And I'm not going to splash for a 2-mana card. In the early turns, you want to be, relatively reliable with your mana. Your splash cards come up later in the game. This could still be good later in the game. I just don't think I'm going to splash for a 2-mana card. Incubation Sac. Can this win the game on its own? It represents 9 power and toughness without any proliferating. Now it takes 13 mana to get there, but you pay that in installments. And you get the 9 power and toughness in installments. So, turn 4 you get a 3/3, turn 5 you get a 3/3, turn 6 you get a 3/3. So let's do a little bit of math here. So, turn 5, you've attacked them for 3, they take 3 damage. Turn 6, you've made your 3rd one, you attacked for an additional 6, they've taken 9 damage. Turn 7, they take 9, they go to 18 damage. And turn 8, they're just dead. So you can kind of think of Incubation Sac as being like a 4-drop, except it's 3 4-drops. All in 1 card. And while it's mana intensive to do so, it gives you a presence on the battlefield. It's a reasonable payoff for the investment of mana. And clocking the opponent by turn 8 for a 4-drop is very good. I would say this card has high potential to win the game by itself. Skullbone, no potential. Crawling Course, not bad for its mana cost. Not bad. I don't know that this is going to make the cut into the final deck. We still have a lot of cards to pick. And it's not bad. We might be going wide with the strategy, and this creature dying to still remain as yet another creature helps with going wide. These are both square deals here. Blightbelly Rat, it's actually kind of like it has haste because it proliferates, so it quickens the clock by 1 turn when it dies. Scourge is fine. Furnace Strider's good. We're not in red, though. Titanic Growth, no potential. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Crawling Chorus works well for our Toxic here, but it's not like we have a lot of 4-drops in the deck at the moment. I think the Incubation Sac is the take. I know it doesn't work with our Toxic. Necrogen Rot Priest. Well, this is coming a bit late for us to switch off into black. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 good white cards. I don't think trading it for these 4, if I chose the Rot Priest, I don't think that is a good trade-off. Now the math on the Rot Priest is good, especially in combination with your other creatures, and giving them Death Touch can get them through for damage. I just don't think we're in black at the moment. So, Duelist of Deep Faith. It's good for the mana value. Yeah, not in black. These have none. This one's good. Just, you know, fair though. It's kind of like a 2/2 with haste, except it's much more likely to connect with the opponent because it buffs up a creature to get really large. Makes it more likely that creature will get through for combat damage. So it's like a 2/2 with haste that's likely to connect with the opponent. Not bad. And Sky Scythe Engulfer. So this is better. This is better than the Grimnarch. This is better than the 4/4 blue flyer. This is 6 power for 6. It's basically fair. It's fair for its mana value. It takes 4 turns of attacking for it to win, but it's very likely to connect with the opponent because of the trample. It's very hard to deal with in combat because it's a 6/5. It also can't be blocked by creatures with flying, so trample and that ability makes it doubly evasive. Its potential is actually quite high. Not bad. We don't have a 6-drop. Not that you need a 6-drop per se on your curve. Having these 5s and a 7 is pretty good. And these might come around late, so we might get some of these anyway. Because we've got such a strong poison theme, payoff cards like the Slaughter Singer and the Incisor Glider, I think the synergy of the deck is really starting to coalesce here. We have a really strong Toxic deck shaping up. And I think we, at this point, keep leaning into it. So even though the Sky Scythe Engulfer is the better potential card, I think for our deck, the Duelist of Deep Faith is going to end up being better. Alright. So, I've got some off-color cards, none of them are impressive, so it's between the Crawling Chorus and the Copper Longlegs. The Crawling Chorus is by far the higher potential card. So is that what we want? I think if our Toxic synergies you know, go all the way to the top, where, you know, just about every creature we play is toxic, it starts to push some other creatures out, like the Copper Longlegs. At that point, our potential is so dense that we might not run cards like the Predation Steward and the Copper Longlegs. That's kind of the choice we're looking at here. This is a good blocker, and I think it pairs up well against all the flyers in the format. We might still end up running this Copper Longlegs over the Predation Steward because of that, so that we have some defense on the crackback. But I believe that what our deck wants here is the Crawling Chorus. Alright, Bladed Ambassador, it's good for its mana cost. Low, none. Basilisk, we need 3 drops. We need 3 drops and it fits with the Toxic theme. And even though this can become indestructible once, you have to pay a mana to do it. I think the Basilisk is the take here. Low, middling, decent. Okay, this probably won't make our deck. It's starting to become too many, but I'm going to take it. Alright, so if we know we're not splashing into black at this point, then we go ahead and take this combat trick. It may not make the main deck, but it could. Flesh Cutter, pick 13. Let's go. Alright, that goes in sideboard. Jin-Gitaxias. Oh no. We have to pass them. I mean, we don't have to. We could, you know, Mythic Rare draft here. But that would be poor behavior on my part. I'm really trying to teach the best drafting habits I can here. I could show a rare draft on the channel at some point, and the main interesting part is how to cobble together a deck afterwards and try to win any games once you've done that. Not going into black at this point. Good trick in green. Lightbringer, we have a piece of equipment now in the deck. We've got the Infested Flesh Cutter. And we could use more 3-drops. It's not inconsiderable. Orthodoxy Enforcer. So might tokens are artifacts. In addition, we actually have some non-token artifacts here. We've got Incubation Sac, Glider, the Flesh Cutter, the Sentry, the Rib Skiff. Actually, this card will turn on. 4/4 Vigilance is completely fair deal. Maybe better than you would expect to get at this mana mark. Good blocker. We don't really have much at 4. This could be good for our curve. Sinew Dancer. Not a big fan of this. Low potential. Have to have Corrupted for it to be... I mean, the 4 and tap is just not where I want to be with this card. I'm likely to get Corrupted. I still don't love it, though. Off color, off color, off color. We're not really an oil deck. We've got the Cultivator. That's just for our mana. It's for mana acceleration. Actually, the Incubation Sac has oil on it, too. But this would be more of a defensive piece. It's pretty middling as far as potential to win the game itself. Not the worst by any means, but more of a board stabilizer, I think. And then you got the Tyrannax Atrocity, and this is incredibly powerful. There's nothing wrong with this Orthodoxy Enforcer, except it doesn't have Toxic, and at this point our deck has a really strong Toxic theme running through it. We have all of these Cultivators to ramp up our mana acceleration. I think we can do 5 drops over 4 drops here. Okay, slow and off color. Off color. Really good. Really good, and we do have some things with oil. We could consider splashing the Cinder Slash Ravager. I don't really like that idea. As far as mana fixing, gosh, none to speak of, right? There's the Mirex. That's about it. So yeah, we're not really set up to do a good splash color here. You know, I guess I don't like the idea of running 2 mountains in this pile just to try to fit the Ravager into the deck. The card is good, but I think it's better to keep our consistency in this case. Charge of the Mites. So can create 2 1/1 mites with toxic 1. So this represents 2 power and 2 toxic for 3 mana. 2 toxic for 3 mana is kind of like 4 power as far as killing the opponent. So Charge of the Mites is actually pretty good. Because it's instant speed, those mites are more likely to connect with the opponent. And this is a deck where we might end up going wide. So the first mode on it to remove something could be alright. This is pretty good. Charge of the Mites, decent potential to win the game by itself, and it can do other things. I like it. No, not going back into black. Off color, it's good though. No. This is solid. This would be a solid choice. We have a lot of 2-drops already. But gosh, Toxic 2 at 2 mana, that's incredibly powerful. No. Well, okay. Once Corrupted ticks on, this can kill the opponent in 20 turns, so it's low. It's not none. No. Okay. This is between Branch Blight Stalker and Charge of the Mites. They're both good, could use more 3 mana things, and in this case, we can use this as a threat, or we can use it as removal. I think this is pretty great for our deck. We're going to take Charge of the Mites. Okay. No, good in general, but not for our deck. No. Decent. We could take this. No. This is good too. So this is the Toxic 2 is like 4 power, and the Menace makes it hard to block. The 4 toughness makes it relatively likely to not be double blocked, because if you're swinging in with several things, then it's hard for the opponent to double block this, get a profitable trade in combat, and still block anything of your other board. It's also a good blocker. Yeah, I think overall this card's a square deal. It's good. Could win the game by itself. Good, not in our colors. Good, not in our colors. No. Okay, Basilisk. That's in consideration. No and no. Okay. So we've got the Lightbringer or the Basilisk. And I think because of the toxicity of our deck, we're going to take the Basilisk here. Okay. Not for our deck. I think it's fair, basically, otherwise. 2 toughness makes it a little bit less likely to connect, but the Inner's battlefield trigger could be good, which could make up for the low toughness. Kinkerbloom's good. It's good. And Proliferate means it's not just completely dead in our deck. This could be effectively like a shock to the face with Proliferate. So it can threaten with its power, it can take care of things, it can also proliferate to possibly do a poison. So it's not the worst choice. No potential to win the game. Oh, another Charge of the Mites. I think I probably like that better than the Kinkerbloom. Slow, not in our colors. Not in our colors. Not toxic and not really that good. Another Basilisk. Just be all death touch all day. Another Cultivator. We might get more of these anyway towards the end of the pack. Okay, I think this is... Okay, this is between Charge of the Mites, the Kinkerbloom, and the Ikerspit Basilisk. Okay. Well, we already have 3 Basilisks. We just got the 1 Charge of the Mites. Charge of the Mites is the more flexible card between the Basilisk and the Mites. Basilisk does good work, but we have 3 of them already. I think we'll take the Charge of the Mites here. Alright. No, don't feel like splashing for it. It's great, though. It's for an oil deck. Low potential on its own. It's kind of a neat trick if you get an oil counter on it. Then it becomes a pretty good deal. 3-4. Pumping up your other oil creatures can add a lot of potential to your board overall. But it's not for us. No. Low. No. Lowish. No, no, no. Okay. Alright, we do not have a green or white card to take here, except that we could take the Golem, the Titanic Growth, or the Prophetic Prism. Now, if I was trying to be 3 colors, I would take the Prism, for sure. It's hard to splash colors in Limited. We're not trying to do that, though, and our 3-drop slot is starting to firm up a bit here, and this does nothing for our Toxic. I think we take the Titanic Growth. May not make the main deck, but there's a chance it could. Alright, Noxious Assault. Paladin of Predation. Paladin of Predation. Okay. Yeah, we have the potential for so much mana ramp in this deck. I think we go to the top rope again. Like I said, 2 attacks with this kills the opponent, and it's hard to block. And if you can block it, it's still hard to deal with. Middling potential. It's decent. Could be high. On the Zealot's Conviction. Not in our colors. Plague Nurse is a square deal, and at this point we have so many creatures with Toxic that her activated ability could be devastating to the opponent. She is a good blocker at 4. Not the worst attacker either. Yeah, it's between the Paladin of Predation and this Plague Nurse. I think with how much we could potentially ramp our mana, we go for the Paladin here. I think we go for the big card. There's a chance we could tempo the opponent out with Plague Nurse. Get it down on 4 if we have good attacks into their board, pump with the Plague Nurse, and maybe it could be better, but I'm gonna go with Paladin here. Feels like more of a choice. Oh my goodness, same choice again? Okay, we got 2 drops. This Duelist is good, but we've got 2 drops. So we don't need these white cards here. And green is looking very open this pack. I think that means we've made a relatively good choice here with our draft. So yeah, this is between the Paladin of Predation and the Plague Nurse again. Gosh. How much mana ramp do you need in order to run 3/7 drops? That's a good question. I think 2/7 drops is fine. And I think Plague Nurse fills a good spot on our curve now, having taken the second one already. I'm going to take the Plague Nurse to fill our curve out here. Alright, Bladed Ambassador. Branch Blight Stalker is even more threatening than the Ambassador, other than the Indestructible. Yeah, we're going to take the Branch Blight Stalker here. Tyvar Stand is a good trick. We do have a piece of equipment, otherwise this is just kind of a, fair, nothing exciting. We have the artifacts to turn on the Orthodoxy Enforcer. 4/4 Vigilance is nothing to sneeze at. Lightbringer also doesn't have Toxic, so I think I like the Enforcer better than the Lightbringer here. Yeah, so it's between taking this Enforcer as a 4-drop to gum up the ground, potentially win through damage, or a Tyvar stand to give us a trick. And I think our 4-drops could use filling out a little bit more. I'll take the Orthodoxy Enforcer. Alright, we could take the Atlas as a piece of ramp at this point. We do have some upper drops in the deck. It would be nice to get to with a little bit of mana ramp. Branchblight Stalker is a really high potential card, though. Really high. And these cultivators are probably going to make it in where the Atlas would have gone, so yeah, I think we take the Stalker. Alright, here we definitely take the Atlas. We're not going to try to splash the Furnace Strider in. I mean, we could try to splash in a trick like Hazardous Blast to win the game, but I'm not real big on that. There's a chance the Atlas could make the deck for the ramp. Alright, look at these green cards coming in late. So, let's see, the Restoration, Return a Permanent, Proliferate. Do we want this as a synergy piece? Honestly, I think the take is another Basilisk. Okay, nothing doing here. I'm going to put the Crescendo in the sideboard. And Zealot's Conviction, it does not add any toxicity. It does a good job with damage. And the first strike could make it more likely our creature gets through. We'll probably get cut. Go ahead and just take it, though. Alright, so at the end of the day, we have gone into green-white. So, we're at 53 cards out of 40. Let's cut some things and see if we ever want to add them back in again. Alright. So, hard choices here. I'm not sold on the Rib Skiff. I'm not sold on the Atlas. I'm not sold on the Titanic Growth. Not sold on Complete Devotion. Not sold on Zealot's Conviction. Okay. It looks to me like we have a lot of playables. I am going to cut this down to 40 cards, though. The reason I kept the other draft up to 49 cards, including lands, was because that was a self-mill deck. There was a very real possibility in a long, drawn-out battle of attrition we could have milled ourselves. That's not going to happen with this deck. Alright. How many Rustvine Cultivators is too many? 4 is probably too many. Go ahead and cut one. Let's see, Incubation Sac is a very powerful card. It is, really and truly. Doesn't do anything with Toxic synergy, though. And my goodness, do we have a lot of Toxic in this deck. For now, I'm going to cut the Incubation Sac. Glider plays very nicely with Toxic. I'm not cutting the Flesh Cutter. This is making it in. Stalkers. Upper Long Legs. Predation Steward. Alright, I did say I would take the long legs over the predation stewards. I'm going to cut the steward first. Toxic, 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 toxic. No toxic. Toxic, toxic critters, toxic, toxic. Okay, yeah, we're almost all toxic here. The Enforcer is a good 4-drop. We have the artifacts to turn it on. But I think we can tighten up our toxic theme by cutting this card. We're getting down into cutting playables now. This is just hard choices ahead from this point. Okay, there are other reach creatures we could have ended up with. We have not especially, so as far as flying and reach, we have the Shepherd, we have Incisor Glider, Copper Longlegs has reach. So the reason I'm looking at that, this is a very aggressive format. When we are on the play, it's going to be nice to have either Incisor Glider or Copper Longlegs to drop down when we're on the defensive. Shepherd comes later in the game. I don't think we cut her here, but it doesn't matter as much for early game blocks. Yeah, I think the glider and the long legs are important for early game defense. It's going to be... Oh, it's hard choices of what to cut here. Maybe we cut a basilisk? There's a lot of basilisks. A lot of basilisks. Going down to 2 cultivators is probably good. I don't mind getting 2 of them. Right, if I draw a hand and it's got 2 cultivators, 2 cultivators is going to let me see 5 drops and the 7 drops much sooner. The third one, though, could be losing out on potential. You know, then we flood out and we don't win the game because we drew 3 Rustvine cultivators. 2 seems good, though. Alright, this is hard. This is very hard. Yeah, I think we cut a basilisk. Two more cards to cut. The Copper Longlegs does not synergize well with the deck. I would love to have it as an early blocker. We do have the Incisor Glider that could potentially be an out against an early aggressive start from an opponent. Otherwise, we may just have to race him. Maybe sometimes we'll lose on the play to like a God Draw. I think we have to cut the long legs here. The toxic synergy of the deck is just so strong. I want to take advantage of it. Alright, one more card to cut. Guess it's going to be one more basilisk. Okay. Alright, now let's take a look at the mana. It's a very even split between white and green. 11 to 13. Right, 8 and Phyrexia. Yeah, we have early drops for both colors. Effectively 9 sources of both. The Phyrexia can be either color for 1 turn when it first comes down. Yeah, I think that's good mana for the deck. Alright, so join me for part 2, where I will take this deck into the field and we'll see how my strategy has worked. Until next time, stay cool.